So on today's podcast, we're talking about the transfer portal that is happening in sports, but also acknowledging that what is happening across workplaces in our world, perhaps the transfer portal isn't just in sports. I'll explain. Welcome back to the Thermostat with Jason Barger. If you're currently on a commute, a walk, or just a micro break in your day, glad you're making time to step back, to think, and to reflect on the next steps on your journey. I've never been more convinced the best leaders and team cultures in the world are the ones that make time to step back, breathe in good oxygen, and calibrate their thermostat. I hope today's conversation leaves you feeling grounded and inspired. Now let's dive into today's topic to engage our minds and hearts in order to authentically lead and create compelling cultures wherever we are in the world. Hey everybody, it's Jason, and welcome into the Thermostat Podcast. Wherever you are and however you're coming to the podcast today, welcome in. So glad you are here. We are in Season 9. We have now well over 275 or something like that episodes. So much great stuff out there. If you haven't checked out the past stuff, just Google my name, Jason Barger, and whatever topic around leadership, culture, mission, vision, values, trust, communication, whatever it is that's interesting to you, and chances are you're going to find an episode that hopefully resonates with you. However you're coming to the podcast today, so glad you are here. If you are new to the podcast, welcome in. Again, invite you to go back and check out all the old episodes. If you are one of the OGs that have been with us from the very beginning, then so glad this continues to add value to your life and your work, and I hope you'll go back and listen to those episodes. My commitment to you, as always, the listener, every time I record one of these, my intention and my hope is I want this to be a place where you can step back. You can take a deep breath and you can think about the temperature that you're trying to set in your life and your work, and hopefully have some thoughts that breathe a little good oxygen into you so that you can think about that temperature you're trying to set and be clear on what some next steps might be for you, your team, your organization, however you're thinking about the pod today. My only ask before we dive into today's topic, if you'll do me the quick favor, if you will rate the podcast 5 stars, whatever platform you're on, just rate it 5 stars, smash that button. If you will subscribe, of course, if you haven't already, if you'll leave an authentic review in your own words, that really helps the algorithm. So if you are willing to share why you think these messages are helpful and important in a very noisy world, then that carries a lot of weight. So thank you for everybody that does that. And then lastly, anybody that shares the podcast, if you share episodes on social media or with your team, your organization, your colleagues, however that is for you, and to say, hey, here's an episode that really resonated with me. Let's listen to it. Let's talk about it. Those are the ways in which these messages are amplified and spread further in the world. And for everybody that helps to do that, I'm very grateful. Thank you so much for doing that. If you're a sports fan, then you're quite familiar with the talk lately about the transfer portal. If you're not a sports person, hang with me. Don't worry. This topic is relevant. But if you're not a sports person, the transfer portal refers to the state of college athletics now, where athletes can put their names in an online portal showing that they're open to moving to a new team or a new university. In the new NIL era, which stands for Name, Image, and Likeness Days, where athletes are able to be compensated off their likeness and their talents, which I'm all for, by the way. People should be able to be compensated for something that brings value to their organization, especially when the organization is making massive money off of their likeness and their abilities. However, I'm also not alone in the sentiment that greater governance rules or guardrails are needed for this. What has created, which again is positive in so many ways. Again, I'm very much for people being compensated and valued for the value that they create. So there are many positive ways, but some unintended consequences is that we now have the wild west of a marketplace where there are no limits to what people can bid, offer, give in order to attract someone to their team or their school. Unlike any other professional sports or entities, there are no legal contracts and stipulations. And so better guidelines are certainly needed for the longer-term stability in my opinion. And so But there are some things that have been good, but it's creating this very interesting environment right now across college athletics and this new world that we're moving into. On the very first day that the portal just opened, just a few weeks ago, opened in men's college basketball, already on day one, there were over 1,000 names of student athletes that had entered themselves into the online portal. 1,000 names on day one, people that were open to this marketplace. And again, I'm not surprised by that in terms of I don't judge these people for doing it. Again, this is the system that they're in, and certainly if there's a marketplace for their abilities, then to be open to what that might be. But it's created this weirdo Wild West marketplace where the bidding game is on. So on today's podcast, we're talking about the transfer portal that is happening in sports, but also acknowledging that what is happening across workplaces in our world, perhaps the transfer portal isn't just in sports. I'll explain. But before we dive deeper, let's pause, take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Many teams and organizations right now are realizing that they need to do both. They need to engage the minds and hearts of their people in person, where everyone in the room can experience the energy of congregating together and find clarity for the road ahead. And they also need to continue to find ways to engage the minds and hearts of their people virtually, with those who are working remotely or at a distance. So, if you are in the process of planning your next team meeting, company all-hands event, conference or culture summit, and are looking for support with a powerful keynote speech, facilitated team conversations that are the currency for change, or deeper development on leadership mindset and an intentional strategy for the culture you're trying to create, I hope you'll contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. It is my privilege and our honor to partner with great people to provide support in these areas. We want to breathe oxygen into your leaders and throughout your organization so you can set the temperature you want for your culture. We look forward to connecting with you soon. I hope you'll contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. It is my privilege and our honor to partner with great people to provide support in these areas. We want to breathe oxygen into your leaders and throughout your organization so you can set the temperature you want for your culture. We look forward to connecting with you soon. So, as I identified, the transfer portal is open and active in college sports. I'm really happy for the many awesome stories that have come from this. Low major, players who were under-recruited and went to smaller schools and yet went there and proved themselves as players at lower levels and now are getting opportunities to play at higher levels and then to be compensated for it because they have shown an ability to contribute and make a difference. And players who their universities, who had been selling their jerseys for years, but the athletes not getting a fair piece of that value creation are now able to earn value off of their name, image, and likeness. So there's some good things that have come from this for sure. For the majority who will not earn a living playing their sport professionally, that's huge. The fact that while they're at this time in their life where they are valuable and they are creating value, they have an opportunity to earn some compensation during that time, even though many of them certainly won't go on to have a professional, in further leagues in their career. So it's a good thing in that ways. And even with those, major wins and great advances that have been made, again, in my opinion, guardrails and governance is needed because nothing is binding and there are no limits in the current setup of this system. The long-term sustainability of this current setup is certainly in question. But as I hear people talk about the transfer portal, and in many cases hear people talk about the troubling aspects of this current environment and marketplace, I remind them that absolutely more governance is needed to help provide clear rules and agreements. And I also remind them that the transfer portal isn't just in sports. In fact, we've been experiencing it across organizations forever, but certainly for the last few years. The most dramatic and obvious example of this is what was referred to as the Great Resignation. In 2021, when nearly 48 million people quit their jobs, and then 50 million continued this trend by quitting their jobs in 2022. This began what has now been described as the Great Reshuffle. Free agency, if you will, had been open, and the war for talent has been happening across all of these organizations and across industries. Organizations across industries have been working tirelessly to attract new talent to their organization. The transfer portal, if you will, has been open, and employees have shown that if they don't feel the vibe, the love, the fit in your organization, the statistics tell us they will go somewhere else. So you can see the parallels to what we are now experiencing in college athletics. I heard Seth Greenberg, a former coach and prominent ESPN commentator, who I like very much, by the way, but I heard him say a quote that I thought was quite interesting as he was talking about this idea, the transfer portal in athletics. He said, this was his quote, "Transformational recruiting is over. It's all transactional now in the portal and only about money into the future." That was his quote. Transformational recruiting is over. It's all transactional now in the portal and only about money into the future, end quote. I understand his comment and certainly frustration as I could hear him talking about this in this very moment. However, I completely disagree because the same thing is happening across organizations. Back to the world outside of sports, what is interesting about those 100 million people over a 2-year period that swirled this great reshuffle into place by resigning and this war for talent beginning is that many studies were done to see what these people wanted and what were they looking for. And interestingly enough, the studies and the research and talking to these people is that it was not just money. Money, of course, will always be an important element, and people need and want to be compensated fairly. That will always be true. But the studies actually showed a different response. The research shows that people actually are looking for what they deem to be a more meaningful culture. And if they're choosing between a few different places, much like, again, I still think in college athletics, if they're choosing between a few different schools that are offering around the same level of compensation, the studies show that people will actually take less money if they deem to be a part of a more meaningful culture. That people actually want more meaning and be a part of a culture actually over money. And again, money is an important piece of the puzzle. People need to be compensated fairly, but that's not the driving factor. And so I actually believe transformational recruiting is as alive in college sports and certainly alive within organizations as ever. And so Gallup, who studies this across industries and organizations, for years they've told us that 9 out of every 10 people choosing between jobs where the compensation is on similar levels, 9 out of every 10 of them will take actually less money for what they deem to be that more meaningful culture. In an even more recent Gallup study, only 20% of employees say they feel connected to their organizational culture, and yet 90% of them say that's exactly what they want. So, why I disagree with Seth Greenberg's statement is that for the majority of humans, and I would say the best organizations, it has never been and never will be only about the money. Again, there will always be people that will jump for money, of course, and there will always be organization where that is the lead. But the best talent, the best organizations, it will never only be about the money. The money, yes, has to be fair and valued, but what will ultimately make the biggest difference are the leaders and people within an organization that make the culture more meaningful. How they do what they do is different and more attractive than just the money. This is playing out in real time across organizations in the world. Those who are just throwing money at their labor issues are attracting people who are only after the money. And they end up, in many of these cases, it ends up being like a revolving door in their organization, jumping to the next organization that just offers them more. And certainly that's happening in sports too. There are some players that is the strategy that they are going for. However, the best organizations and most sustainable for the long term, and oh, by the way, most compelling organizations that people want to be a part of, are certainly offering a fair and attractive rate of pay, but it is their culture that is what is retaining their best people and making the difference for attracting the people who truly are looking for that meaningful place to work and be, and are looking for that transformational experience rather than just the transactional. I've seen this firsthand in many of the organizations that I work with to support their leadership development and the intentional culture shaping work that we're doing together. Through very intentional, authentic, and proactive engagement across their organization, we've seen, in a couple of different situations or organizations that I'm thinking about in the back of my head that I've been working with and supporting for a number of years, we've seen their turnover drop. In one organization, I know in particular, drop from 20% to 9%. In another organization, I know we dropped the turnover from 16% to 8%. And I know another one where we've dropped it by another 8% in another industry. So in these examples, we've also seen their hiring pick up. More and more people attracted to how they are doing what they're doing. And what I say to them all the time, and when we're talking about the ROI or the return on investment as it relates to developing people and culture, is what's the return on the investment of this kind of proactive and intentional engagement around people and culture? It's massive. Because retaining the great people you have, instead of that revolving door of hiring and training, and finding great cultural fits in the way that you hire and the fact that you are attracting more people, is huge. Plus, we also know that even beyond retaining the best people and attracting the best talent to not just what you do, but how you do it, but we also know that more engaged, and again, that transformational kind of experience that an employee has, that we know those kind of engaged workforces are 22% more productive and more effective toward the mission of whatever their role is or whatever the organization is. So I would respectfully say to Seth Greenberg, transformational recruiting is not dead. People still want meaning. They still want connections. They still want to be a part of a more meaningful culture. And when you can fairly compensate people and provide a meaningful culture of connection and development, you become a best place to work. So whether you are Duke University or The Ohio State University or Florida or University of Houston or Rutgers University, you will become more valuable, attractive, and better at what you do when you're able to create cultures that offer fair compensation and create an award-winning culture or program that people want to be a part of. And if you don't, people will go elsewhere. The market has already shown us this reality outside of sports. So the best practices that I see the best organizations putting into place are, yes, competitive compensation. The best places do honor and value people fairly, but they also aren't just overpaying for the sake of overpaying. They have a compelling vision, a vision of what they are trying to become, and an invitation to be a part of helping them create that future. They have clarity on the culture. Part of that vision is how they do what they do. The way they go about their work together is as important as what they actually do. They also, if you look at best practices, they have intentional strategy and development. So beyond the clarity of the culture they desire, they're actively growing it. They're shaping it. They're leading it. They're developing it by the way they hire, by the way they onboard, by the way they coach, by the way they develop the people and culture across the organization. And lastly, they listen and they evolve. They listen to their people and continue to evolve, through the old language from the book, some of Jim Collins' work of Built to Last, when he said, preserving the very core of your past and at the very same time stimulating progress for the future. So what we know is we are all ambassadors for the life and for the cultures that we want to be a part of creating, and we get to make them and create transformational experiences for our people rather than just fall into that transactional mode of business. So, transformational over transactional creates longer-term value and impact. So, as always, let me leave you with a couple of questions for us to consider as you're thinking about the topic for today. How do you want to approach the transfer portal in your work and the world? What intentional strategies would help you shift from transactional kind of recruiting to transformational? Who do you want to retain on your team, and what type of people do you want to attract? And what's your intentional strategy to do both? I hope today's episode got you thinking in some ways. And again, the opportunity is to create places that people want to be a part of. That is what a thriving organization is doing in the world. And developing people and culture isn't just an add-on, it's an intentional and proactive strategy. So cheers to you on the path ahead. I hope this has stimulated your thinking. If you have any thoughts or feedback or ideas for us, or you just want to connect, and if we can be more supportive to you and what you're trying to do in your organization, shoot us a message, info@jasonvbarger.com, info@jasonvbarger.com on email. Or you can just go to the jasonvbarger.com website and send us a message through that, and we'll get back to you as soon as we possibly can. So thanks for everybody out there that rates the podcast 5 stars, of course, who leaves the authentic review, who shares it with other people. That's the way these messages are amplified, and I thank everybody for doing that. And the last thing I'll just remind you is to step back. Remember, be a thermostat and breathe good oxygen. Thank you for listening to today's podcast, and I hope the messages and questions stimulate positive change along your path. As always, if these messages resonate with you and add value to your life, I hope you'll help amplify them throughout the world. Please rate, comment, and share on whatever podcast or social media platform you're using, and share this podcast with the people in your life or work who should be part of these conversations. That way, this spirit does, in fact, spread. If these messages or developing leaders and culture would be helpful to you and your organization, please contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. And remember, we are all ambassadors for the culture we want to create in our life and work. We have to own the vision we want to be a part of. The future of leadership is you, is me, is us. Be a thermostat.